Welcome to Eurodollar University with Jeff Snider. No, you're not in the wrong place. Jeff has a real interview to do after this show. That's why he's dressed up. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get to enjoy Jeff's pretty look as well as his wisdom. Have I introduced myself? My name's Emil Kalinowski, and we're going to be giving you another reason why the US Treasury curve may have inverted. Jeff, we've gone over 3 of them so far. We gave 2 monetary reasons that there was an increase in repo fails in October. That's the key, ladies and gentlemen, right? Then that the Federal Reserve started increasing their lending of securities to the market. Number 3, a more macroeconomic reason, that inventory started to pile up in the United States. And now we're going to go over a 4th real economy reason why, starting in October 2021, the US Treasury curve started to flatten, eventually leading to inversion. Have I set the scene properly, Jeff?
Yeah, Emil, and not only that, there's actually a 5th that we might get to maybe next week or so. But you know, I think the point you're trying to make, and you're doing a very good job making it, is that October. We keep coming back to that month of October, and in terms of markets, it's October 8th. We have a specific date. That was the date in which the Eurodollar futures curve stopped steepening and started to flatten, and then eventually inverted in this early December and continued on the rest of the way to the point where it's now ridiculously inverted. And the U.S. Treasury, the yield curve, again, October 8th. Now, it didn't actually steepen like the Eurodollar futures curve had. It kind of just went sideways and stayed where it was from throughout the summer into early October. But then October 8th, it's almost like somebody drew a straight line from October 8th, relatively steep, to now inverted in March and April of 2022. So like you said, man, October. These kinds of things, when you see curves go upside down and inverted, you know it's never just one thing or another. There's usually an interplay of reasons why these things happen, because curves don't want to be inverted. They want to be upward sloping. They want to be beautiful. They want to be optimistic. And it really takes an enormous amount of bad vibes, if you want to call it that, or bad data, or actually bad economy or bad money to get these things out of whack as much as they are. And so we have a number of reasons that coincide with this October inflection point.
Okay, well, I'm going to do the big reveal. Ladies and gentlemen, real personal income, excluding transfer receipts, has declined since October. Now, Jeff, was that the headline that came out when we got this data? Or no, was it all about the PCE and inflation, and nobody bothered to say, hey, have you guys noticed that income is not growing as much since October?
It's almost like you're very cynical about the mainstream financial media, Emil. I'm not sure why you would be that way, but yeah, you're right. I think most people looked at the PCE deflator part of it. This is the personal income and personal spending data that the Bureau of Economic Analysis puts out, the same folks who put out the GDP numbers. They also keep track of consumer prices and, in fact, the PCE deflator, or the bunch of deflators that come with this data, personal income and personal spending. These are the ones that the Federal Reserve actually pays attention to. That's the one they prefer. They don't like the CPI because of the way the CPI is constructed. They'd much prefer the PCE deflator, which, like the CPI for the month of, February, not looking good. And consumer prices, on average, growing at 40-year high rates, core rates upwards to a slight deceleration in the core, but nobody cares about that. The only thing everybody pays attention to is the headline rate, which screams, 1970s or something.
Okay, we've got the graph up now, Jeff. It's real personal income, excluding transfer receipts, all the way going back to 2016 to present February. Jeff, I've got 5 notes, so hang with me here. The first thing I wanted to point out, Jeff, is that the last time we saw some sort of flatness, actually 2 times ago, in this curve, in this line, which should be rising, real personal income, was at the end of the 2016 slowdown, the BRICS bust-up. And of course, the BRICS bust-up was taking place in Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, not in the United States. Yet, as you often write, it's a coupled world, not decoupled. And we can see how Americans saw their income flatline right at the very end of what we call Eurodollar number 3. My second note, Jeff, notice that, of course, the revisions after the fact are down, always down, at least since
Always down.
since the silent depression began. These revisions are not up. They're always down. So again, it was worse than was being reported at the time.
Yeah, keep that in mind. Always keep that in mind. As we're going through all of these data points, remember, a couple years from now, we're likely to find out it's probably a little bit worse than it actually shows up as it is today.
Number 3, Eurodollar number 4 was real, ladies and gentlemen. Again, the last time we saw a flattening in real personal income was taking place in 2018. You can see it, how it just goes sideways again. Then it started to rise towards 2019, and in 2019 we go into 2020, we have the COVID. And then my fourth note is that October peak, we had a little bit of an aborted recovery, didn't we, Jeff? And then, okay, finally we made a comeback, and here we are again now, October 2021. Tell us, Jeff, is there anything to take away from this other than just, yes, it peaked then, along with so many other measures?
Well, a couple things. It's actually a double October, right, Emil? Because it started to recover after the initial rebound, reopening back in 2020, and then October of 2020, it kind of stopped. It just stopped dead in its tracks, and ever since then, real personal income, excluding transfer receipts, has been basically flat. And so we're talking like what is that now? My math isn't very good, but that's 17 months, 16 months, something like that, without much growth in this measure. And by the way, this particular measure is one that the NBER uses, those private economists who get together and decide, quote unquote, what is and what is not a recession. This is one of the 4 numbers that they use to actually help them date business cycles. And it's not supposed to, as you've said already, Emil, it's not supposed to be flat. It's supposed to be rising at a relatively decent clip. And if it's not rising, like a curve that's not in its beautiful upward sloping shape, we know something is wrong, because what it measures is not just all income, because there are times, such as now, when a lot of income is derived from artificial means, such as government transfers, stipends, unemployment payments, grants that are supposed to be loans to businesses, and any number of other things. We want to know what's going on in the private economy. And if the government is doing a lot of interference and intervention in the economy, is that intervention actually having an impact in the private economy as it's supposed to? And what we're seeing from this particular number that removes transfer payments from it, no. In fact, despite the jobs numbers that look terrific, what's really happening is that the economy sort of slowed down in terms of real income in October of 2020. And then in October 2021, we pile on top of that this acceleration in consumer prices, which tells us that even though nominal payments and nominal wages are rising relative to where they were, they're not rising fast enough to keep up with the supply shock or the aftermath of the supply shock, which means even though consumers as workers are getting paid a little bit more in their paycheck, they're falling further and further behind, given how prices, due to the last year's supply shock, are outpacing even the aggregate gains in wages as well as financial income.
Final thought from me, Jeff. The inventory measure that we discussed recently, that comes with a 1 to 2 month delay. This, here we go, right now, real income, also comes with a 1 to 2 month delay. The monetary measures, the security lending by the Fed, the repo fails by primary dealers, again, over a week delay, Jeff. If only there was a real-time measure that would have alerted us at the time that the economy was suffering. If only.
I mean, something like a curve or an actual market, use those things that everybody just ignores or doesn't pay attention to.
I don't blame the Federal Reserve, to be honest.
Your point is a good one, Emil, and we don't talk about it enough, which is it's almost like these are two separate things. We talk about the markets, and the markets are the markets, and then we talk about economic data, and it's almost like the two things don't mix, especially in mainstream conversation. But for us, it's, the way we look at it is this data comes in later and helps us piece together what we already have seen in the marketplace. So we see something major happen, an inflection in the yield curve, an inflection in the Eurodollar futures curve. And then later, we get some data from the BEA, or we get data from the Federal Reserve itself, whether it be, repo fails or something else, which, by the way, I think we're going to talk about next week because there's a developments in repo fails and collateral and all that stuff too. Our reason number 5 to go back to October. But anyway, the larger point is that there is a comprehensive picture here. Markets, data, all this stuff, even the revisions years later that tell us kind of what we already knew at the time. It's all a comprehensive picture of what must be going on. So we have real-time snapshots based on what market prices and market spreads and things are doing. And then we get high frequency data that maybe is not as necessarily reliable, tends to be noisy, but oftentimes it does confirm what we're seeing in the marketplace, which makes sense because that's what's trading in these markets, especially these sophisticated markets like Eurodollar futures. Who is moving the Treasury curve? It's real economic participants that otherwise we wouldn't be able to observe.
For the audience, if you're interested in learning or hearing what we had to say about the other what? Jeff, what am I looking for? Sparks, reasons that the Treasury curve may have begun inverting, flattening. Well,
the lengthening list of suspects, right?
The usual suspects. Well, I will put that.
The usual suspect. And like the movie, right, Emil? These suspects have all been working together.
Yeah, I'm going to ask, you've got me on, I'm going to put it in the show notes, ladies and gentlemen, those previous episodes. Jeff, I'm going to ask David for the next piece of artwork to have a lineup of the usual suspects, except it's going to be, elites and leaders, technocrats, and that sort of thing. I'm figuring out who to put in each of the 5 positions. It's going to look great. We'll make it good and funny. All right.
Maybe we should have that in the comments. People tell us in the comments who should go up in the lineup, because that, I think, who looks like whom in the movie. That would be interesting.
All right. Thank you, Jeff.
All right. Take care, Emil.